Oh, this is rich, not loud, not obvious, but powerful in the way a storm feels before it hits. You sensed it, didn't you? That subtle shift in how people looked at you, that strange pause before someone answered, that uncomfortable silence that used to be warm, not because you did anything wrong, but because you did something dangerous. You grew, and growth makes insecure people nervous. When you level up, you don't just improve your life, you disrupt the emotional economy of everyone around you. People who used to feel above you suddenly feel threatened. People who once felt needed suddenly feel replaceable. People who used to control the story suddenly feel irrelevant, so the energy changed. The smile stayed, but the intentions didn't. You noticed it in small ways first. The delayed replies, the way conversations suddenly felt shallow, scripted, cautious. That wasn't paranoia. That was intuition picking up on betrayal loading in the background. Because while you were focused on your life, some people were quietly focused on stopping it. They didn't come to you directly. They never do. Weak people don't confront. They coordinate. They gathered in rooms you were never invited into. In group chats you didn't know existed, in whispered conversations disguised as concern. And they all had one topic in common. You, not because you were loud, but because your presence was starting to expose them. Your confidence highlighted their insecurity. Your peace revealed their chaos. Your progress made their excuses look small. And that's what they couldn't handle. So they began to talk. They took moments out of context. They took your boundaries and called them arrogance. They took your silence and called it guilt. They didn't tell the truth. They told the version of the story that made them feel justified. Because when people don't want to feel inferior, they make the person above them look evil. That's how envy works. Not with open hatred, but with secret meetings and twisted narratives. They didn't say, "I feel threatened by them." They said, "And that's when it began." Organized attempt to shrink you back to a version they could feel comfortable with. They weren't trying to understand you. They were trying to control the story about you. But here's what they didn't realize. You didn't need to be in that room. Your character was already there. And truth never stays silent for long. They walked into that room feeling powerful, united, confident, certain. When a group of insecure people agree with each other, it feels like strength. It feels like proof. It feels like justification. They sat there repeating the same story about you, layer after layer, emotion after emotion. They told each other how you were selfish, how you changed. But what they really meant was, you stopped being easy to control. They built a version of you that fit their bitterness, a character that made their jealousy look reasonable. And for a while, everyone nodded. Everyone went along, because lies survive when nobody challenges them. But then, something strange happened. Someone in that room hesitated. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a pause, a quiet moment where a memory didn't match the story being told. They remembered something different, the way you helped without expecting credit, the way you were honest when being fake would have been easier, and suddenly the version of you being described didn't feel right. One crack, that's all it takes. Another person remembered a moment of your loyalty. Another remembered your kindness. Another remembered how you protected people instead of using them. The energy shifted. The room didn't feel as unified anymore. What they were doing started to feel ugly. Not righteous, not justified, ugly. And here's the truth they didn't want to face. They weren't gathering to tell the truth. They were gathering to agree on a lie. And some people couldn't live with that. So slowly, quietly, they began pulling away. Not from you, but from the version of themselves they were being asked to become. Because it's one thing to feel jealous. It's another thing to sit in a room and help destroy someone who never harmed you. And that's where their plan began to fall apart. You weren't there to defend yourself, but you didn't need to be. Your past was doing it for you. Your character was sitting in that room even though your body wasn't. And the lie they were trying to build was collapsing under the weight of who you really are. That's when half of them started to see it, not you themselves. Here's the part that destroys them the most. They didn't expect anyone to think. They expected emotion. They expected group anger. They expected blind agreement. Because most people in a mob stop using their mind. But when those first few cracks appeared, something dangerous happened inside that room. Reality started walking in. Not loudly, not aggressively, quietly. One person questioned the story. Another felt uncomfortable. Another realized they were being asked to hate instead of understand. And suddenly this wasn't a meeting anymore. It was a mirror. Every bitter sentence spoken about you made them feel something strange in their chest, not confidence, discomfort. Because deep down, they knew something was wrong. They weren't exposing a villain. They were rewriting a human being. That's why half of them couldn't stay. They weren't loyal to you. They were loyal to their own conscience. They didn't walk out because they loved you. They walked out because they couldn't hate you, and that matters. Now here's the twist your enemies never saw coming. The moment those people left, the lie lost its camouflage. Before, everyone could pretend this is what everyone thinks. Now it was just a small group of bitter people talking to each other. No balance, no opposing voice, no sanity check, just resentment feeding resentment. And that exposed them. Because hatred looks powerful in a crowd but pathetic in a small room. Those who stayed became louder, angrier, more extreme. And that's what desperation looks like. Because when lies start breaking, they don't get quiet, they get aggressive. Meanwhile, the ones who left, they became something dangerous to your enemies. People who know it wasn't fair. People who saw how forced and fake the story was. So now every time your name comes up, someone remembers, someone hesitates, someone knows. Your enemies tried to create a narrative. They accidentally created evidence. Evidence that when people were forced to really look at you, they couldn't destroy you, they could only expose themselves. And you didn't say a word. You didn't defend yourself. You didn't need to, because truth doesn't need a speech. It just needs time. And they gave it to you. Now pay attention, because this is where the energy shifts. After that meeting ended, something terrifying happened to them. They lost control. Before, they felt powerful. Before, they felt united. Before, they believed they could shape how everyone sees you. But now, half the room is gone. Half the voices no longer agree. Half the story collapsed. And when people lose control over a narrative, they don't become calm. Become loud? That's why you're feeling more tension now. That's why the gossip sounds harsher. That's why the accusations feel more dramatic. They're not getting stronger, they're getting desperate. Because desperation makes noise. People who have truth on their side don't shout. They don't have to convince anyone. But people who are losing, they scream. They exaggerate. They twist harder. They push more aggressively. Because if they stop, the silence will expose them. So they keep talking, keep repeating the same stories. Not to hurt you, but to reassure themselves. They need to believe their lies because the cracks inside their own group are haunting them. Meanwhile, look at you. You didn't change your behavior. You didn't beg for sympathy. You didn't start explaining yourself. You stayed the same. And that's what's breaking them. Your calm is louder than their chaos. Your silence is heavier than their noise. Every day you don't react, they feel smaller. Every day you keep moving forward, they feel weaker because they wanted to see you fall. And instead, they see you unaffected. That's psychological torture to someone who hates you. They wanted guilt, they wanted regret, they wanted fear. They got indifference. And indifference is the one thing their ego cannot survive. So while they keep spiraling, you keep rising. While they argue, you build. While they talk, you grow. And the gap between you keeps widening. That's why they're shouting. That's why they're panicking. That's why they can't stop talking about you. Because deep down they know they already lost. They didn't expect this part. They thought once the whisper started, once the lies were shared, once the story was twisted enough, you would panic, you would react, you would come running to defend yourself. But you didn't. You stayed silent. And that silence became a storm inside their minds. Now look at them. The ones who stayed in that room. The ones who refused to leave when the truth became uncomfortable. They're not confident anymore. They're nervous. Because now they know something dangerous. They know half the people they once stood beside don't believe them anymore. And that changes everything. Every time they open their mouth now, They hesitate. Every story they repeat feels weaker. Every lie feels heavier. Because somewhere out there, someone knows what really happened. Someone remembers who you really are. You see, hate only works when everyone agrees. Jealousy only has power when it feels justified. Lies only survive when nobody challenges them. But the moment even one person steps away, the illusion begins to collapse. The energy in that group has changed. It's no longer a confident crowd, it's a paranoid circle. They're watching each other. They're wondering who might leave next. They're afraid of who might speak up. They can feel it slipping. They know they lost control of the narrative, and it's eating them alive. Because you didn't do anything, you didn't attack, you didn't explain, you didn't beg. You simply let the truth exist. And that was enough. Now they're trying harder than ever. Posting more, talking more, but it doesn't hit the same. Because desperation is loud and truth is calm. People can feel the difference. That's why the ones who left that room are quiet now. Not because they're ashamed, but because they finally see clearly. They see how ugly it was becoming, how small it felt, how wrong it was. And they're relieved they didn't stay. They're relieved they didn't let jealousy turn them into someone they wouldn't recognize in the mirror. Meanwhile, the ones who stayed, they're trapped. Trapped inside a story they can't escape. Trapped inside a version of you that doesn't match reality. And that conflict is painful. Because every time they remember your kindness, it contradicts their hatred. Every time they remember how you showed up, it weakens their lies. Every time they remember the real you, it destroys the version they're trying to sell. That's why they're spiraling. That's why they can't move on. That's why your silence hurts them more than any argument ever could. You became the quiet reminder that they were wrong, and they can't outrun it. They wanted you to fall. Instead, they're the ones losing their balance. And the more you stay calm, the faster they collapse. They thought you were weak because you didn't react. They thought silence meant surrender. They thought walking away meant you lost. But here's the truth, they weren't ready to face. You never needed to fight. You didn't need to argue your side. You didn't need to defend your name. You didn't need to explain who you are. Because people already knew. That's why their meeting failed. That's why their story collapsed. That's why half of them walked out. Your life had already spoken for you. You see, fake people survive on noise. They need chaos. They need reactions. They need emotional explosions so they can twist them into proof. But when you gave them nothing, when you stayed calm, when you refused to beg for understanding, you forced them to face something far more dangerous. The truth. And truth doesn't need volume. It just needs time. Somewhere in that room, while they were pointing fingers and stacking accusations, someone remembered a moment when you helped them, a moment when you didn't have to, a moment that didn't fit the story being told. Memory was stronger than 1,000 lies, because real experiences don't fade, they don't get erased by gossip, they stay. And when people are forced to choose between a story and a memory, memory always wins. That's why you didn't have to be there. Your character was already sitting in that room. Quiet, solid, unshakable. While they were building a case against you, your life was quietly tearing it apart. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't try to control the narrative. You simply stayed who you are. And that's the kind of power they can't touch. Because you can't attack what is real. You can't destroy what is consistent. You can't silence what doesn't need to speak. That's why their plans fell apart. You were never the one in danger. They were. Because when lies collapse, everyone sees who is standing on them. Now that the room has split, now that the truth slit through the cracks, they can't go back. The people who walked away, they can't pretend they didn't feel it. They can't pretend they didn't remember. They saw how fragile the lie was, how forced the hatred sounded, how desperate the story felt. And once you see that, you can't unsee it, even if they try to go back to the group, even if they try to act normal. Something inside them has changed. They know the truth now. And the truth is uncomfortable. It makes you question yourself. It makes you replay conversations. It makes you realize how close you came to becoming cruel for no real reason. That's why the ones who stayed are angry, not confident, not powerful, angry. Because deep down, they also felt the crack. They also noticed the hesitation. They also saw people pulling away, and it scares them. Because a lie only works when everyone agrees to protect it. Now there are witnesses. Now there are people who know what really happened, and that means every future lie about you feels weaker. Every future attack feels forced. Every future accusation sounds hollow. They can talk, they can try, they can get louder. But they lost something they can never get back: control of the story. You don't have to say anything, they already know who you are. And that's what's eating them alive. Here's what makes this story truly dangerous to them. You didn't lose anything. You didn't walk out of that room, but you walked out of their control. They no longer get access to your energy, your reactions, your emotions, your spirit. And that's the one thing they were counting on. They wanted to provoke you, to drag you into chaos, to make you prove yourself. But instead, you chose distance. You chose silence. You chose peace. And that choice cost them everything. Now they're stuck with each other. Stuck with their bitterness, stuck with their jealousy, not explaining, not defending, not fighting, just becoming more focused, more powerful, more untouchable. That's why they keep thinking about you. Not because they miss you, but because you became the proof that they were wrong. Wrong about you, disfighting about you, wrong about themselves, wrong about the story they told. You were supposed to break, you didn't. You were supposed to beg, you walked away. And that quiet strength, that calm refusal to be dragged down, that's what really destroyed their plan. They tried to gather against you, but you stood alone, and you won, not with force, but with truth. Here's the part they never prepared for. You didn't just survive their meeting, you outgrew it. While they were sitting in a room trying to decide who you are, you were already becoming someone they could never touch again. But you kept moving. They tried to trap you in their version of the past, but you stepped into a future they don't have access to. That's why nothing they say lands anymore, because you're no longer standing where their words were aimed. You shifted, you leveled up, and that's the real reason they're unsettled, not because they failed to hurt you, but because they failed to define you. They wanted power over your name, your image, your reputation, but you took your power back the moment you stopped needing their approval. Now every lie they tell sounds weaker. Every accusation sounds desperate. Every attack feels hollow. Because the truth is walking ahead of you like a shield, and everyone can see it. You don't have to clear your name. Your consistency already did. You don't have to expose them. Their behavior already did. You don't have to get revenge. Life already did. They stayed in that room, stuck in resentment, stuck in bitterness, stuck in the story they wrote just to survive their jealousy. And you walked into something higher. You became something stronger. You turned into the one thing they can never be: free. And that's the ending they never wanted.